Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, that you are attending the FMRI webinar series. I think it's the last one for the summer 2021. We have a pleasure to have with us Miss Jessica Josselyn, that is a principal planner at Kittelson Associates. She holds a bachelor degree in civil engineering, but she discovered early in her career that transportation planning was where she most wanted to focus her technical training and its application. Ms. Josselyn has spent a majority of her planning career supporting city-state agencies and federal agencies as well in the preparation of multimodal corridor studies, long-range plans, and regional plans. Ms. Josselyn's presentation will focus on a corridor study along the 45-mile segment of the state road SR 80 Palm Beach County. The purpose of the study was to develop an action plan for the corridor aimed at improving traffic and freight operation over a 20 years period. This is this webinar partnership with the WTS FAU student chapter and Valentina Marcus, the new chapter president for the academic year 21-22, will take the questions at the end. Please send questions to Valentina through the chat or by mail. And at this time, Jessica, you have the floor. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaiser. It's my pleasure to be here today. Hope everyone's having a great Friday, that everyone's healthy and safe right now. So Valentina, can you let me know you can see my presentation?
Yes, I can see it. Go ahead.
Great, great. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So before diving into technical information on this project, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I know some of you on the line here know me, so great to see you join. But for those that don't know me, my journey is through my career kind of took me throughout the country. So I just celebrated 18 years of my career yesterday, actually. So it's an exciting milestone for me. From New England. So I started life over in Connecticut in the north, experiencing the 4 seasons. And from Connecticut, I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute over there in New York. You can see on the screen, it's a well-known old engineering school that was founded in 1824. And I always joke that I was a little nervous in engineering school because I didn't really click with engineering well. Until my junior year when I was exposed to transportation. I loved it immediately. So I'm really grateful that that happened on my journey in college. And I met Kittelson Associates through doing roundabout research in college. So that's how my connection was made and how I started creating the relationships in my career journey was doing undergrad research. So I started interviewing with Kittelson and I got offered a position over in Portland, Oregon. And I actually hadn't gone west of New York my entire life. So that was a very intimidating and scary journey, but I took it and no regrets. Going over to Oregon was a really, really great opportunity and adventure. It's a beautiful part of the country if you haven't been over there. And I was in Portland, Oregon for about 2 years, just getting my learning, embracing learning on all things transportation that Kittelson offered. And about 2 years in, my sister had transferred to Florida from Connecticut. So that's where you see I'm now down in South Florida. I live in Pompano, but I represent Kittelson in both the Fort Lauderdale and Miami offices. So I've been here since 2005. So I'm soon going to be calling myself a native of Florida. And a little bit about myself. So I am turning 40 this year. And like I said, I just celebrated 18 years. So it's been really important to me going into this kind of next 20 years of my career to truly ground myself and know who I am and what my passion and purpose is, because that does change over your career. And for me, it's impacting lives and people in a positive way. So I have actually joined the John Maxwell team. If you don't know John Maxwell, he is one of the world's biggest entrepreneur and leadership teachers. I highly recommend you researching his books and studying from him. He has so many just great things to offer. He's very inspirational. So that's a really exciting journey that I'm heading on, where I hope to bring coaching and mentoring in the transportation projects I do and the teams I work with. I'm also now working with 4Kids of South Florida. It is a foster care organization that is looking to make sure every child in South Florida has a loving home. It's just been such an impactful, amazing group to work with. In the bottom of the screen there, I participated in the Back to School drive, where we collected backpacks and gave back to the community. And I will be teaching the 18 to 24-year-old foster kids residents about transportation, actually, and helping them learn that transportation is a profession. I'm sure many of you on the line, if not all, found transportation by accident. We don't learn about it early on in our lives. So I'm really looking forward to just share the greatness that our industry has in terms of helping communities. And then the bottom left and center is my family. They are my #1 priority. So it's my sister, her son, JP, who just started high school, and my brother-in-law. And then I just adopted a senior dog, Stella, that you can see in the middle there. So I just always like to give a little bit of a background in settings like this to kind of create a bit more relationship and connection between myself and you all. So I encourage, if you want to drop any notes about things you're passionate about or hobbies and things like that, feel free to put that in the chat. I'd love to learn more about you, even though we're through a screen. So a little bit about me is done, and now I'm going to jump into the Multimodal Corridor study, the State Road 80 Corridor Action Plan. And the style of today's presentation is actually walking you through what was our public workshop. I wanted to walk through the process of a public workshop and how we set them up and why we set them up the way we do. And then, of course, I'll also walk you through specifically about State Road 80, the data and our findings, and ultimately what came out of this project that is a few years now old, but it's a very interesting project, and it really aligns well with the freight group because State Road 80 is a major freight route for the state of Florida. So in every public workshop, we have to make sure that we are providing equal opportunity and access to all. There are non-discrimination laws and regulations that all of our projects have in place, and it's very important that these laws are followed for obvious reasons. Equity is extremely important, and in every project we have to make sure that we're not unintentionally or directly impacting a particular group of the community. So often you'll find in public workshops, and many of you on the line know this, that there'll be also different languages presented. Really the whole point of the workshop is to connect with people, engage, and hear and listen from them of their concerns and their values and what's important to them. So we always start a public workshop with a welcome. So for this particular corridor study, we wanted to walk folks through the issues and challenges identified and present the types of improvements that we were considering for State Road 80. So in this particular workshop, it was towards the end of the study, and the results of this workshop directly fed into the preferred alternative, so the alternative that would move forward into future phases of transportation planning and production. So State Road 80, the study limits, was 45 miles. So this, for those that are younger and still in school, this is not a common length of a corridor study that you do. This is the longest corridor study I've ever done. So it was all the way west, starting in the Belle Glade area, and the corridor runs all the way east into West Palm Beach. So you can see here, this corridor study included many communities down at the bottom. You can see several cities, towns, and villages, as well as Palm Beach County. And there were many key stakeholders. So you'll often find in corridor studies like this, collaboration and consensus building is really the key of any project being successful. And when I mean successful is that you will be able to identify a project and move it forward and ultimately assign funding to it and see it constructed. A little bit on the study process for those that aren't aware. We start with collecting data. So often when we go into these studies, people in the industry think they have a good pulse on what the answer or the solution is and what the issues are. But a really good planning process makes no assumptions going in. You really have to start from scratch. You have to have an idea of why you're doing the study, of course. And in this case, it was because congestion. There was a lot of congestion on State Road 80, and it was only forecasted to get worse. But we had to start and collect data. And data was collected for various components, whether it was volume, traffic volume, signal timing information, roadway geometry, land use, the demographics of the community, crash data, a lot of different pieces that we had to gather. And we had to take all of that data and create information. A lot of things I see in my career is folks forgetting to summarize the story and the aha. We often get a lot of data, but what is that data telling you? And that's a really important piece, again, to any successful planning project, is getting that story nailed down and that everyone buys into that story and they can connect to it and relate to it. So that's the first step. And then once you have all the data, you analyze it and determine what are the issues and what are the potential alternatives that could solve those issues. And you engage the public throughout the process, again, at key milestones to make sure that everything's in alignment with the ultimate goal of getting consensus. So for this project, it resulted in an action plan report at the end. And ultimately, after our planning phase, it goes into preliminary engineering and environmental analysis, and then design, right-of-way acquisition, and then construction. So it's quite a lengthy process, and planning is just that first step. So the history and role of the corridor. So this was very, very interesting. State Road 80 is on the Strategic Intermodal System, which is made up of several facilities throughout the state that are what we call the backbone of transportation in Florida. So State Road 80 goes, if you're not familiar, across the entire state from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's an extremely important facility for carrying goods. So from a freight perspective, it's very important. Obviously the airport, if you're from the area, you know the airport is within the vicinity, and then further east, the port, which obviously freight is very connected to those two hubs. So it's just really, really important historically, this facility, and it's planned to continue to be very important into the future. So we do know, or did know going into this though, that there is a lot of need for this facility to keep it moving. There is not a great pedestrian and bicycle experience out there. If anyone's had the courage to ride their bike on State Road 80, in some areas, there's just a lot of traffic and it's moving fast. Also, the land use component, it's a bit of a mix of land uses throughout the corridor, and I'll share more about that in a minute. But there's just a need in this study to really try to better understand what the relationship is between land use and transportation, and if there are any opportunities to develop multimodal solutions beyond just the vehicular focus that predominantly is in the corridor today. Also, if you're local and familiar, there's a lot of development being approved and built in Palm Beach County further west, which is putting a lot of need on State Road 80, and there isn't a fully connected network to the north and south of State Road 80, which was making the pressure in the future for State Road 80 to carry that much more traffic, and why we needed to really study this. So as I was saying, with this being such an important corridor, there historically has been much investment placed on State Road 80. You can see here the extreme makeover. I thought that was really clever marketing. for Southern Boulevard. So you can see hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements have been invested since 2005. There's continuing to be investment made on the corridor outside this study and from this study. So as you can see on the graph below, from I-95 all the way west past Lion Country Safari, there's been investment, as well as over in the Belglade area. So I had mentioned the land use component of State Road 80. This was quite a challenging component of this study because the development tends to be, it's all about timing on when you can assume the development in your future forecasts. And also what the development program is. So in other words, how many square feet of commercial or how many residential units. For those that aren't familiar, you have to identify all of those specifics so you can assume and incorporate in the traffic into your future analysis years to ensure that you're properly analyzing what State Road 80 is going to need to accommodate in terms of moving cars and people over time. So for this particular area, you can see it's potentially generating over 150,000 trips per day along the corridor, which is a lot. So this was a very big concern to the Department of Transportation, again, given the importance of this corridor throughout the state to serve and not only move people, but to move goods. We also looked at the travel patterns throughout the area, and this is commonly referred to as an origin destination process. And it's really interesting in South Florida in particular because we kind of go everywhere. There's not a really strong trend where everyone's going from point A to point B. As you can see with these kind of spider web diagrams to the right, you know, folks are going everywhere. So what that means is you need a strong network, and that having, you know, one trunk line transit route probably wouldn't serve all of the folks and the trips they're needing to make throughout the area. Also, from a land use perspective, we looked at characteristics. So you can imagine from Belglade to downtown West Palm, those are very different makeups in terms of the land use, the density, the demographics. And in planning, it's so important to not do a cookie cutter approach or the one silver bullet solution to all 45 miles. So to make sure the team did not do that, we broke it up into segments, looking at different characteristics. This is now considered and called context classification. The Department of Transportation has coined. Context classification came in after this study started, and context classification is essentially where we understand as a profession, if you have a rural condition all the way to like a downtown Miami condition, that there's a spectrum of different design solutions and target speeds for our vehicles and transit vehicles and walking and biking. So what this does is for segment 1, segment 2, and segment 3, we're able to look at those different characteristics and context classification to give guidance on what the solutions design should be of the roadway. So I'm going to walk you through the 3 segments and our findings for that for State Road 80. So starting on the west in Belglade is segment 1. And, you know, personally, this was a very rewarding component of the project because we found a lot of opportunity to improve safety in the Belglade area. And it wasn't a let's widen the roads and get more cars through. It was truly about helping the community create safer connections and facilities for walking and biking. And that's something that we found through the data. So over the 45 miles, you can see here that nearly 50% of the entire corridor's pedestrian and bicycle crashes happened in this area. And that to us is just, you know, an obvious statistic that we need to invest some safety dollars from a pedestrian and bicyclist standpoint. So outside of that, we also looked at the freight and traffic components. So there's a lot of pass-through of freight traffic through downtown Belle Glade. So there is a desire for a main street to be considered in downtown Belle Glade. And then from a transit perspective, there's a lot of transit ridership occurring in Belle Glade and folks transferring, heading east into Palm Beach County and transferring. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at the transit stops and the hubs so that folks had good access to frequent transit in the area to get them primarily to healthcare access and employment access to the east in the county. So how do you take all of the options and narrow them down to what you actually recommend? So we had a two-tier process that we applied, you'll see, to each of the 3 segments. So the first tier is just develop the long list. So throw everything in the kitchen sink on the table and assess really what can be done, and then screen those alternatives or strategies against the issues you have and the goals you're trying to achieve, and really identify what makes best sense, again, to meet your goals and address the issues you found through your data and analysis. So for segment 1, what did not make the screening was, like I was saying earlier, any major roadway capacity changes. And we also found in the data and analysis and screening that any premium transit, like a light rail level of investment, just really wasn't appropriate for the context of segment 1 in the Belle Glade area. But what we did come up with is listed here. It's a range of different elements based on the data and analysis. So looking at bike facilities, alternative freight routes, the downtown Main Street I mentioned, pedestrian and bicycle crossings, conducting a safety study to really assess at a detail level beyond planning what was occurring out there that was creating the crashes. As I already noted, the transit service improvements and overall just roadway rehabilitation. And you can see here at the bottom left a table with circles. And that was our way during the public workshop to show the community kind of the range of performance by each of the goals that we were trying to achieve. So it's a nice quick visual to show the public how the alternatives and recommendations that you're looking for their feedback on rank from an objective data-driven perspective. So moving now further east along the corridor is what we called segment 2. And this was certainly through the rural area. I believe sugarcane fields are out there. And here, very different context than Belle Glade. So we noted that an additional east-west arterial is needed for emergency and evacuation purposes. For those that have not traveled State Road 80, this is really one route. So if a tractor trailer turns over, if there's an accident and the road gets blocked, or if there's a natural disaster that happens that blocks people off, there really are not any options to travel east and west. So that was something we noted as a potential issue and concern. And then from a safety perspective, north-south crossing traffic, because there's the farms out there, people are crossing State Road 80, and it can be quite dangerous because of the speeds. So that is something that we also noted, that those crossings need to be visible and they need to be safe. So again, we went through the tiered screening process. What we screened out that did not meet our goals was roadway capacity changes. We did not find through this rural area that we needed to add vehicular capacity. And similar to Belle Glade, we also found that the context of this area did not align with any premium transit, such as light rail or streetcar and bus rapid transit. Sorry about that. So in terms of what we did identify as strategies was a corridor-wide greenway. So that was something that we were excited to be able to recommend through this because of Lake Okeechobee, which I didn't previously note, further to the west. Also resurfacing and lighting study. There's been for years now a lot of discussion regarding lighting this area through the State Road 80 farm area. Rehabilitation and maintenance was part of it, and also a safety study. And you can see here, we did similar to what we did with segment 1 regarding the performance to show the public how these strategies aligned with the goals from a data-driven perspective. Now moving to our last segment, our complicated segment, which was from 20 Mile Bend all the way to I-95, is segment 3. So segment 3 is where we get into a lot of that congestion issues and lack of network issues that I was mentioning earlier. So we categorize these issues starting with population and employment. So the population increases to the west and employment increases to the east are creating more trips on State Road 80. You'll remember before we were expecting about 150,000 trips a day into the future on State Road 80. And that's getting into highway level type of volumes. So on the land use and development side, we were seeing that the patterns into the future were continuing to be auto-oriented, which would create more demand. So the idea that the development coming in would not create these trips was pretty much removed as an option because it was very clear that it was an auto-oriented type of development that was going to continue to occur over time. I mentioned before the network concern for State Road 80. So this is on the left, a tool we use to show the effective network. So just because a road exists doesn't mean it's creating opportunities for parallel routes and other ways for folks to get around. A lot of these roads could be dead ends. They could be little neighborhood roads that really aren't meant to carry traffic parallel to State Road 80. So we were able to confirm that certainly the network was a bit limited looking into the future. And then from a safety and traffic standpoint, it was not on FDOT's high crash list, but of course there's always an opportunity to make facilities safer, especially across all modes. And we did see from our traffic forecasting and analysis that congestion is expected to exceed the level of service D target that is on this strategic intermodal system facility. From a walking and biking standpoint in this area, 50% of pedestrian and bicycle crashes resulted in a fatality. So that was certainly something of concern to us when we were looking through the data and seeing if there were opportunities to drastically reduce that and reduce the severity of crashes occurring and just try to eliminate the crashes altogether. And then from a transit perspective, we did conclude by looking at the land use and the densities that this section of the corridor, although the most dense out of the 45 miles, is not ready for premium transit. And again, premium transit meaning light rail or bus rapid, that kind of higher, more expensive transit that runs very frequently based on existing and adopted land uses. So extreme changes would have to happen for premium transit to be a solution along State Road 80. The access currently to transit in this corridor, or at least a few years ago, was limited, and we did recommend it to be improved upon to create more access. I didn't know earlier, but there's also a canal running along the south side of this facility. So that's another kind of data point that the planners and engineers needed to keep in mind in terms of assessing the issues and solutions, because obviously a canal is a physical constraint when it comes to creating more access along the corridor. And from the freight perspective, of course, we had to share with the community, and it's a very important component to let everyone know what I was mentioning earlier, that freight really relies on State Road 80, not only locally, but regionally, going across the state. And access management, we found that 35% of the corridor did not meet access management standards throughout this segment. And 47% of the corridor did not meet access management standards from Forest Hill Boulevard to I-95. So we suspect just over time, since the facility has changed and been expanded upon, there's just a bit of differing design, and the land use, I think, really impacted the access management not meeting standards. So we ran through our tier 1 and tier 2 process, and what we removed from the strategies is a general widening. So we did not recommend taking what is an 8-lane facility to a 10-lane signalized facility. There aren't a lot of 10-lane arterials out there. I don't know if there are any, but we just didn't think that was the type of solution to move forward with, just from a safety and right-of-way perspective. We also eliminated reversible lanes as an option. I am going to assume everyone knows what reversible lanes are. If you don't, feel free to drop a note. But looking at the travel patterns, there wasn't a strong pattern of folks going one way in the morning and another way in the evening. So, oh good, someone asked. So reversible lanes is if you have a set of lanes, so let's say 3 lanes in one direction and 3 lanes the other direction. Reversible lanes will change that up. So you might have 5 lanes all going eastbound in the morning and only 3 lanes going westbound, and then you reverse that in the PM. So it creates dynamic movement in how you use your lanes throughout the day. And typically reversible lanes are only implemented when you have that really strong travel pattern of, okay, 80% of point A is going to point B in the morning, and then that 80% is going back. But for State Road 80, it was really 50-50. So if you have a 50-50 split of east and west traffic, creating a dominating movement for reversible lanes just didn't really make sense. It didn't fit the data. And then similar to the other segments, and as I was already alluding to, premium transit just really isn't a fit here. We wanted it to be, because we're very pro-transit and wanting to create less dependence on vehicles, but it just wasn't a fit with the land use that's out there and the design of the area. So moving to the next slide. We came up with 3 alternatives. So a little different, segment 1 and 2. We just had a list of solutions. We didn't really have an either or. But for segment 3, we came up with 3 alternatives. So alternative 1, it's kind of a mouthful, is signalized arterial with alternative intersections. So what we mean by alternative intersections, you can see at the bottom, are 2 examples of alternative intersections: a median U-turn intersection and a displaced left turn intersection. These can be quite complicated to explain, but essentially we recommended more management across the types of movements that could be made to make the capacity stronger or increased without having to physically widen the road. So what that means is, right now when you drive along the road and you get to an intersection, you can go through, you can go left, you can go right. There's no really restriction on the movements you can make, which means the capacity is going to be impacted because of all those movements being made. So you're going to be having to have more red time, more yellow time, left green phases to get the cars through, where if you restrict some of those movements, you get more flow through the intersection, right? So if you had 20 movements and you took 20 movements down to 10 movements, you're going to get more flow through the intersection. So in a nutshell, that's what the point of alternative intersections is. And also in these intersections are studied to also be more safe because there's less conflict at the intersection. So a safer intersection in theory also has less congestion because there's fewer crashes. Again, in theory and in research. So we wanted to offer this alternative because it had the least right-of-way impact and it had the least change, if you will, and just tried to squeak out capacity by altering intersections along the way. And this is the comparison of the existing on the top 8 lanes and then the proposed. So for this, the typical section really doesn't change. And in our workshop, we love stickers. Planners love stickers at our workshops. So we handed out stickers, and we asked the community to vote and place a sticker, either an alternative 1 or the next 2 alternatives that I'll be sharing. And it really was handy to have that. And it's so simple. You don't have to be super fancy. Just sometimes stickers is all you need to figure out what folks want. So alternative 2, again, our terms are quite lengthy, but partially elevated roadways for through traffic with frontage roads. And this is somewhat what exists today, where the roadway is separated. It's not at grade for some of the sections. So you can see here we have a list below the map of where we would grade separate the intersection. So you would have essentially a flyover. So as you're driving along State Road 80, you go over an intersection where you're not stopped. You'll have a nice free flow movement, and people that want to get off State Road 80 would have to take ramps off. So there's quite a long list there that you can see where we would grade separate the intersections. And we did in this recommendation also have an alternative intersection noted below. And you can see here the performance, it varies. There are some empty circles, so there are some components that just did not meet the goals that we had. And just going back quick to the previous, so here we had about mostly the acceptable performance, with only 2 hitting good in terms of cost effective and minimizing impacts to the business community, like I was mentioning, Rightofway. And then going here, there's quite a few that are poorly performing. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear to folks, especially you can see the right-of-way impact. So again, the top is the existing typical section, and the bottom would be the proposed, where you'd have a 6-lane main line in the middle. So those are for your long regional trips, and then your frontage roads to the outside to access businesses and communities along the area. So again, here we had to place your stickers if you want to vote for this alternative. I do think, and I'm sure all those on the line that do this work, having these typical sections is very important. And it's very important that they follow the design manuals. So the Florida Department of Transportation does an excellent job at creating standards and guidelines so that there's a consistent experience. And it's just so important in the planning phase to properly follow those manuals, because when planning is done, it goes to the engineers and it goes to those designers. And if it's not thoughtfully brought into the planning process, you can hit a lot of barriers and challenges, and you can really lose the momentum of moving a project forward if these standards aren't respected and thought of through the process. And since this study, the design manual has undergone a lot of changes, and a lot of great changes to accommodate all modes better and to create slower speed options. So it's exciting to see what the department's doing with their design standards. But just wanted to note that this was a really important piece for this being accounted for and really respected by the engineers in the process. So the last alternative is alternative 3, which is fully elevated roadways for through traffic. So kind of creating that main line with frontage roads. And here you see the list of grade separated intersections is longer than the partially elevated. And you can see here it does perform better than alternative 2. There's fewer poor grades, if you will, on the performance. And you get several good full circles on this one as well. It really achieved the mobility, preserving that regional trip on the state strategic intermodal system facility, and just keeping access also for the local trips. And it had less impact from a right-of-way perspective. And this is the visual of the fully elevated roadway. And this, was controversial because some people don't want essentially a new highway, but some people really did. And I am here today representing Jessica, by the way. I'm not here representing FDOT. I'm just sharing what the study was. But there were differing opinions. Some people right now might be like, oh my gosh, that's a massive roadway. And some people might be thinking, oh great, we needed a stronger facility through Palm Beach County east-west. So it really was mixed throughout the process. But as you can see, it was our job on the consultant side to give options, and starting from minimal impact, but maybe not providing much more capacity in alternative 1, all the way to alternative 3, where you're providing a lot more capacity. It's pretty expensive, but it also has less right-of-way impacts. And then alternative 2 is somewhat in between. So a very wide range. And then transit was always important throughout the process. So even though premium transit really wasn't appropriate for this area, we came up with what we're calling the West County Bolt. I'm not sure how this has moved forward past this study. I haven't spoken to PalmTran about it in quite some time, but we were just wanting to make sure transit remained part of this. And I did hear that transit improvements were accommodated in the Belglade area, which I think is just great to hear. A lot of hard work went into that, so I applaud the folks that were able to get that done. And since this study, the Palm Beach TPA has done a significant amount of work working with the county and FDOT in developing a countywide 561 plan that has several transit routes beyond the Southern Boulevard. So I think this really helped spark a countywide discussion on transit needs, and acknowledging that maybe Southern Boulevard isn't our primary premium transit corridor, but that it is desired to not continue building highway style throughout. And really, what part do we all play in creating this multimodal county? Because it's not all on FDOT, it's not all in the county, it's not all in the TPA, it's not all in the cities. We really all play a role in developing and forming what our system looks like over time. So in terms of that, we did have a board at the workshop to show really what land looks like and how it's developed around these different components of transit. Because it's not something we intuitively know, like, oh, someone has light rail, they must have this certain density. I mean, unless you're a transit expert, you don't really know. So we tried to provide some visuals and information to the community on that, so you can see where State Road 80 is and kind of the spectrum of transit. So quite a ways would have to be gone or done rather to get to light rail for State Road 80. And then we were through this process wanting to hear folks' opinion on if they supported changing the land use. Because again, throughout the process, there were differing views and differing approaches. So we wanted to hear from the community what they were ready for in terms of land use changes and getting away from more rural suburban and getting into more transit supporting densities. So that was the whole workshop we walked through. There was a ton of engagement, a great turnout. I just am really proud of everyone involved. Again, I know everyone had different preferences on what the solution should be, but I think great discussion came from this study. And I was curious to hear from you guys in which alternative you think the community selected as their preferred alternative on segment 3, that last segment. So if you could put in the chat box if you think it's alternative 1, 2, or 3, if folks are still there, if I haven't lost everyone. Alternative 2, 1, 3. Give just a few more. So it was actually alternative 3. Alternative 3 was what was selected because, one, the community did put the most stickers on alternative 3. And from the DOT's perspective, since they can't control land use and make all those changes, they had to really think about the future of moving freight and goods and people through the corridor without purchasing so much right of way and impacting the businesses along the way. So alternative 3 kept the footprint not as wide while still providing that additional capacity that's needed because of the land use decisions and growth that's coming to South Florida. So it was a really challenging project. Any and everything that could happen happened. But again, the team was great. FDOT was such a pleasure to work with, as well as the county and the TPA. Again, I am glad there were differing opinions and people spoke up and that we were able to have those discussions professionally and respectfully. And we're just gonna keep moving forward and working together on creating good roads. But with that, I am happy to take any questions. I hope you learned some things walking through the public workshop with me. But I'm really happy to answer any questions, whether it's State Road 80, my career, planning, engineering, any of the above. So I think, Valentina, are you going to lead the Q&A?
Yes, and thank you, Jess, for the informational and training presentation. We really appreciate your time and sharing the impacts, the improvements we'll have on the corridor. At this time, everyone, please go ahead and feel free to put all of the questions on the chat, or you can feel free to speak up.
And I'll stop sharing. Let's see. When do you think this alternative will come to reality? That is a great question. So I have not, and this is, I should have prepped more and checked the latest status, but I believe it was moved forward at FDOT. And if there are any FDOT folks on the line, please feel free to speak up. But there was plans to move forward with the PD&E to further analyze alternative 3. I'm not sure if that was actually funded yet, but I believe it's in the making. So this is quite a ways out. If it gets funded and constructed, it'll probably be, I imagine, 10 years plus from now. But I can ask District 4 and maybe follow up for you guys and let Valentina know. Did you have strong public input? Can you share the methods you used for engagement? Did they vary per segment? We did have strong public input. The word strong is probably subjective, but it certainly wasn't one of these workshops where there were 2 people there. There was a pretty steady stream of folks coming in and out of the workshops. I can share a link, actually, Valentina, I'll share a link of the study website that has all the documentation for those that kind of want to dive into the details. But from my 18 years of planning, I felt comfortable that we did get input. There are some projects I'm uncomfortable because, we only heard from a few people, but this one we did hear from quite a bit of folks. And in terms of the method used for engagement, just walking through the workshop, we had 3 workshops. So we had them at key milestones through the process. So first workshop, we heard from folks on making sure that our data and analysis results made sense to the community, that we didn't miss something. And then we went to them again in terms of where we were heading with the alternatives and evaluation. And then we had the third for getting their opinion on what alternative they preferred the most when we were able to show the performance of each of the alternatives. So that was really helpful. We had a project website We had little business cards made that we would hand out. So I can share the public engagement plan with you, but it was very extensive. Actually, in pursuing this project in the interview and in the marketing for it, public engagement was very, very much emphasized, that it was very important because, as you saw, there were so many different municipalities and stakeholders, and each element that makes the alternatives is maintained or managed by a different agency or partner. So engaging the partners and engaging the public was really the only way to get us to a solution that maybe didn't make everyone happy, but at least kept everyone like, okay, I get it. Like I understand why we landed here. So it was very, very important. Did you have to see? Oh, that's a good question because the corridor was so long. We did have different locations. We had outreach in the west, in the Belle Glade area, and then we had outreach on the east end. So that's a very good question. If we had just held meetings in the east end, that would have been a fail because Belle Glade community residents should not be expected to drive to Wellington, say, to have a public meeting. So we did intentionally separate the public engagement into two, where we went to the west and we went to the east. And we shared with each what was happening on each end, but we did customize and tailor the discussion to be what was most important to that group, which would be where, of course, they live. So that's a great question. Equity in the mobility alternatives. In hindsight, I'd say that is where we would improve upon if we were to do it again. We certainly thought of the different demographics and users of the facility and applied law. So Title VI, we did follow what is required from an equity standpoint. But I don't feel it was as pronounced or obvious in terms of our documentation. And I think what I've learned since then till now, that we have opportunity to expand upon that. I am not an equity expert in terms of transportation projects. I'm really grateful that Kittelson is engaging with equity experts to make our planning processes stronger and more inclusive of all. So if anyone has any ideas or experiences, please feel free to share in the chat, but that's a very good question. But I was really grateful that, again, we had the western section separate from the eastern section because they're just different and they shouldn't all be clumped together. Putting a highway in eastern Palm Beach County does not directly benefit the community of Belle Glade, and creating crosswalks in Belle Glade doesn't benefit the communities to the east. So I think it was the DOT did a thoughtful process there in making sure all of the different elements and communities were accounted for. And we have 5 minutes left. Any career questions or experiences folks want to share? And feel free to unmute as well. It's Friday, we can be relaxed. And if that's all too, that's no problem. I'll actually, Valentina, I'm gonna try to put the link in the chat now for folks.
And we will be posting the recording for this presentation along with the slides for anyone else that would like to look back on it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. I know I was talking a long time. It's hard. I always like a little bit more interaction, but I know this is, it's still a great option given COVID. I'm just glad everyone's safe and we're still able to at least have some sort of discussion.